Okay, let's talk the Marauders map. Because this chapter is troubling. Yeah, I'm gonna go with troubling. Because it has this bait and switch technique to it. So we start, of course, with our little time skip forward to the Christmas holidays, or at least getting towards the Christmas holidays, because it's just ahead of that. And we've got another Hogsmeade weekend. And so off Ron and Hermione go, and Harry's just sort of like, meh. And then Fred and George step in, and we get the map. And so off Harry goes to Hogsmeade, and he joins Ron and Hermione. They end up at the Three Broomsticks, and then we find out a whole lot of information that maybe it would have been logical for Harry to know ahead of time. So Sirius Black was his father's like best friend. They were so close they were almost brothers. There was some reason that Harry's parents went into hiding, and Black was the secret keeper of this spell that would have hidden their house and family from everybody that was not in on the secret. Harry's godfather is actually Sirius Black, and Sirius Black turned him over to Voldemort, and then when he showed up at the end of the night, attempted to take Harry from Hagrid but gave in, and then apparently killed Peter Pettigrew, who was also a friend of his dad's. It's a whole lot of information, like information overload. And in another read-through, we know it's all wrong. Like, at first we are like Harry, we were like, oh my god, no. But we can't do that with a read-through. Again, because, well, it's all not true. Well, at least most of it isn't. All the terrible parts aren't. Sirius wasn't actually the secret keeper, that was Peter. Peter betrayed the Potters. Sirius went after Peter. And Peter's the one that blew up the street and killed the Muggles and made himself look like he was dead. But that's... I mean, it certainly helps drive the plot forward for first-time readers. But a good book will always give something to the people rereading it. And this moment of all of this information, what it actually allows us to do, even for first-time readers, especially for first-time readers, is ignore our moral questions and moral quandaries, and Harry's moral quandaries, in favor of Sirius Black's. Because the chapter name is pointing to the map. The map is the important part in all of this, not the secret of Sirius Black. Which, I mean, that could have been an equally good chapter title, and that would have said that the really important stuff is this story we're hearing. Except it's not. Because the fright of the fat lady, the flight of the fat lady, doesn't occur in that chapter until the very end. Yet we still have that chapter title because that is the concerning bit. That is the bit we need to focus on. And in this chapter it is the Marauders map. Because right off the bat there are a lot of issues that different characters are pointing out. Fred and George admit to stealing it. Like, straight up stole it from Filch's office. Like, straight up stole it. And that's brushed aside by them of, he probably never figured out how it worked. That's not the point. We then have Harry, who, as a flashback to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley about the diary incident, about don't trust something if you can't see where its brain is. What is the difference between the map and the diary in this moment? Like, that's a big concern. Because at first when I read it, I was wondering if it was because we suddenly got these names to it. When the diary opens, it begins, of course, with Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauders map. So I thought, is it because we have these names and we're saying, okay, this is where the brain is? Except the diary does that too, because the diary introduces itself as Tom. So, is it because it's more than one name? Are we more likely to trust a group over a single person now? And again, Tom at the time seemed very trustworthy. Both Ginny and Harry fell into that belief. And Harry only got out of it because Ginny was addicted at that point. So, does it come down to the mob mentality? Oh, there's more than one person involved here, so it can't be too bad? Because, I mean, like, Harry questions it. Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. The map was one of those dangerous magical objects Mr. Weasley had warned against. Aids to magical mischief makers. But then, Harry reasoned, he only wanted to use it to get into Hogsmeade. It wasn't as though he wanted to steal anything or attack anyone. And Fred and George had been using it for years without anything horrible happening. So can we reason ourselves out of things like this? I don't think we should be able to do that. Because we should still directly have that diary in mind, because Ginny probably reasoned these things just as well as Harry is here. Now, Harry does point out the fact that, okay, prior information tells me that Fred and George are fine. Because Fred and George have stated that they've been using it, they found it first year. Which means they're in their 5th year at this point in time. Yeah, they're 1 year ahead of our Golden Trio. So they've gone 5 years without releasing a gigantic snake onto the school. But again, he still says, I wouldn't want to steal anything or hurt anybody. And that stealing we then have an issue with Fred and George. Yet somehow this is the thing that we let go of. In favor of, oh, Sirius Black betrayed the Potters. He's so bad. What are our moral issues in this moment? I think it's pretty bad if we're willing to drop moral issues for one character in favor of picking them up for another. Just like way back in the first book, I was talking about how Ron and Draco are very similar. And how you can't write off Ron as a perfect character and say Draco is terrible, or the other way around. Because they actually have a lot of similar biases. And what that simply tells you, of course, is that nobody's perfect. You can like someone and they're still going to have flaws, and major flaws that they need to work to improve on. So does the Marauders map become one of those moments for us? Is this something that we actually directly need to address, especially since, looking ahead, Hermione doesn't turn the Marauders map in, but she turns the Firebolt in. So we have to question then, is even she willing to write off that this isn't actually the worst thing in the world? Because it's useful? Are we willing to to write off the Marauders map because we can use it. And so we feel like we're in power over it rather than it is in power over us. Because I think that's a possibility. The other possibility, I think, is in this form, because we're going to see it in another form. In this form, it doesn't actually, for the most part, directly communicate with anybody. It is not writing back and implanting information constantly. Except Rowling never lets us get that comfortable, because when Harry goes to the statue, suddenly it's the Marauders map telling him how to get through. What did he have to do? He pulled out the map again and saw, to his astonishment, that a new ink figure had appeared upon it labeled Harry Potter. This figure was standing exactly where the real Harry was standing, about halfway down the third-floor corridor. Harry watched carefully. His little ink self appeared to be tapping the witch with his minute wand. Harry quickly took out his real wand and tapped the statue. Nothing happened. He looked back at the map. The tiniest speech bubble had appeared next to his figure. The word inside said Dissidum. So the map is actually communicating new information. It might not be in direct conversation with the user, but it is. And that point gets even worse when we have... Pardon me while I find this. Okay, so it's even more apparent because in the chapter Snape's Grudge, Snape demands to see the paper, a spare bit of parchment, as Harry claims it. He aims to throw it in the fire. Harry defends it quickly. And then Snape proceeds to correctly guess that it's written in some sort of invisible ink, and possibly instructions to get to Hogsmeade without passing the Dementors. So then he makes some demands on it, telling it to show itself, and he demands, Professor Severus Snape, Master of the School, commands you to yield the information you conceal. As though an invisible hand was writing upon it, words appeared on the smooth surface of the map. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. Snape froze. Harry stared dumbstruck at the message, but the map didn't stop there. More writing was appearing beneath the first. Mr. Prongs agrees with Mr. Mooney and would like to add that Professor Snape is an ugly git. It would have been very funny in the situation if the situation hadn't been so serious. And there is more. Mr. Padfoot would like to register his astonishment that an idiot like that ever became a professor. Harry closed his eyes in horror. When he had opened them, the map had its last words. Mr. Wormtail begs Professor Snape good day and advises him to wash his hair with a slime ball. Which is extremely diary-esque. Especially since the map seems to be logical enough that it can actually connect Snape to the young Severus Snape that the map's owners grew up with. Because Mr. Padfoot's line of, an idiot like that ever became a professor. So, the map gives us a lot of information that we didn't have. It teaches us things, like the diary. It teaches us things in a possibly communicative way, and insulting way, which again, could be really funny if the situation wasn't so serious. If we had this before the diary incident, this would be a riot. And That's why we don't initially get this communicative aspect when Harry first gets the map. Because that would put Harry off far too much to actually be able to use it. But since we don't have that, and it's just showing him the way things are, he's willing to use it. So that becomes the moral question. Do we trust the map because it shows us the way things are? Fully and truthfully as far as the map can. On all different levels, because Harry identifies a human, an animal, and a ghost. Specifically Peeves the Poltergeist. So the map can actually understand and display these things. So do we trust it because on this one we think it's not lying to us? When with the diary we'll know now that it was. Except before, when we trusted the diary, we didn't realize it was lying. So the map then becomes a massively moral question. Is it right to keep using it simply because it seems useful, or at least more useful than the diary was? Even if there are some dangers to it. And I don't think we ever actually see like a whole lot of dangers to it. But it's still a question of, is it right to use it when we don't know that? Especially if it's stolen property. One of the other questions then, of course, is exactly what Fred and George were using it for. But Ron and Scabbers has been in the school for 3 years now, and they never noticed Peter Pettigrew's name. They were raised in the wizarding world. You'd think Peter Pettigrew, as the hero that went after Sirius Black, the right-hand man of Lord Voldemort, is gonna be known. Especially if he's sleeping in your brother's bed. But maybe that's not what Fred and George have been paying attention to. I mean, even Harry doesn't notice it until later. It's an issue. Why hasn't anyone noticed these discrepancies? Unless you're using the thing that maybe you shouldn't be using only when it suits you and only when you need it. And you're not listening to what the rest is telling you, even if the rest is telling you is actually a warning. Oh God, the map is such an issue. But we're willing to write it off because, oh my God, Sirius Black is Harry's godfather and got his parents killed. And I don't think we can do that. So I think we better keep an eye on this map. And I think we've got to keep an eye on what these students are willing to call it and what they're not willing to call it. Because it becomes one of those things where then how do we define what's safe and what's not if the definitions of both are exactly the same? Okay, so heading now into equaling troubling territory with a particular broom that's about to come into it. It's going to be particularly interesting after this chapter because, again, if the map's okay, why isn't the broom? Or if the broom's not okay, then why is the map? These books are getting a little more hard to deal with because it's not a whole lot of black and white now. We're definitely into the shades of grey. Harry Potter and the 50 Shades of Grey. No. Ignore that I did that. And I hope you keep reading. And I will too. I'll see you next week. Bye!